Jane Fonda is regarded by President Nixon as one of his most dangerous political enemies. Some states are beginning to boycott her films, and the Los Angeles City Council is here proposing a resolution of censure on her for daring to express her views on the Southeast Asian War. In spite of these threats, Jane Fonda continues to speak out.
I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to the resolution of censure, because I find not only is the existence of such a resolution a serious and disturbing matter that I don't think the City Council should be wasting its time dealing with, but I find the content extremely disturbing. There are assumptions in the resolution that I think have to be spoken to. One assumption is that it is wrong for an American citizen to do whatever is necessary to find out as much as they can about the nature of the war. I went to North Vietnam in July. This was after I'd had the opportunity to read government documents that are called the Pentagon Papers. What they showed to me, and what they've shown to many Americans, is that we, the people of the United States, have been lied to for 27 years about U.S. involvement in Indochina, that a series of administrations have not told us the truth about what we were doing there. I went to North Vietnam at a time when the President of the United States, Nixon, was telling us that the war was winding down. And I felt that it was my responsibility, as it is all our responsibilities, to do whatever we can to find out what is in truth going on. What I saw was utter devastation of civilian targets: hospitals, churches, schools, dikes, marketplaces, cultural centers, women and children in hospitals whose bodies had been destroyed by weapons that are illegal, outlawed, whose use constitutes war crimes. It is interesting that in Mr. Schneider's resolution, he quotes a POW saying that the most disgusting thing about the war, in his opinion, were my broadcasts from North Vietnam. The broadcasts of an American citizen talking to soldiers, not asking them to desert or defect or mutiny. It's not the job of a civilian to tell a soldier what to do, but describing what it was that I was seeing, as I wish every single person in this country could see, because I don't believe that the pilots know what it was they were dropping and what the bombs were hitting. The resolution is also criticizing me because of the position that I've taken on prisoners of war. The hand-picked few, the 5% of the POWs who participated in a wave of press conferences organized by the Pentagon, which were creating a particular impression. The reason that I think the impression is a lie is not because of what I saw, not because of what the Vietnamese told me, but because of what other POWs have said, what other American pilots who were in North Vietnam have said about their treatment. And these men are not being given national coverage. No one is hearing their story, and I'd like to know why. I'd like to know why it is that these hand-picked few senior officers are being made into heroes. Why not the 50,000 American soldiers who died in Vietnam? Why are they not heroes? Perhaps it is because voices from the grave can't praise President Nixon for peace with honor. Paraplegics in the VA hospitals don't make good spokespeople for the President of the United States.
When you were growing up as a little girl, I mean, your father was a major star. You were living in Los Angeles. I mean, were you exposed at that time to, say, the myth of Hollywood or all the razzle-dazzle, or did you live quietly?
Not the razzle-dazzle as much as maybe other children were. I mean, there are weird things that happen, like, you know, most kids' parents go to work 9 to 5 and come home, and they're pretty much the same person all the time. And I just sort of remember that my father would, you know, 1 3-month period, he would have a beard and have put on a little weight and would be riding a horse when he went to work. And the next 3-month period, he would have shaved and had brilliantine in his hair, and he'd be playing a pirate or some, you know, he'd be all these different people that would that we would have to go and visit at strange places in the countryside, in different kinds of contexts that range from the frontier days to the pirates of Penzance to it fit in quite well with a child's life and fantasy. You know, it didn't seem extraordinary or special or anything to me. We lived on a farm. My father plowed and planted, and we raised animals. It was a big farm, though. It was a special farm. But I didn't realize until I went away to boarding school that there was anything special about being a movie actor.
This is just how life was. I mean, riding off on horses or being a pirate or just...
It was just that my father made a living in a groovier way than other people did. It was more fun for me. The things that I remember looking back on it now, though, is how you're conditioned by... I mean, we're all conditioned by movies, the movies that we grew up with. When your father is an actor and is one of the people who is making these movies, I think it's even sharper, but... I just remember very clearly how those movies affected me and my friends. We wanted to be the Lone Ranger. We wanted to be the cowboy. Indians were people you killed. Indians were people who scalped civilized white people. Indians were people who were hordes of savages that always attacked at the dead of night, not civilized like white people who would fight in a civilized manner during the daytime. Men were the people who fought off the Indians. Women would go like this and shriek and run into the room and hide in a closet or something like that. And these stereotypes were absolute, absolute. It was a man's world. My images of myself was always as a man. I was always a Lone Ranger, Buck Rogers, a cowboy. When I would play and we would choose names, I would be Buck or something, but it was never the only female image that I ever that was ever made available to me was Sheila of the Jungle. There was a comic book where this outrageously beautiful woman in a sexy kind of leopard thing would do what Tarzan did, would swing through the forest, you know. So occasionally I would be Sheila of the Jungle, but aside from that, there were only men that you could identify with if you wanted to be a winner in life. And so that kind of sexual stereotype coupled with the racism of the way Indians were portrayed, which then lapsed over into the Second World War because we went from the Westerns portraying Indians in a particular kind of way to the Japanese portrayed as Japs with big teeth, only instead of going woo, the Japs would go banzai and attack at the dead of night. Again, hordes that, you know, you were always giving the impression that it didn't matter how many you kill, and you could drop an atomic bomb on their country, but they would just multiply so fast that there's no way you could wipe them out. All, of course, preparing the way for the dropping of the atomic bomb and putting Oriental people in this country in concentration camps during the Second World War. And this is the product of the kind of movies that my father was making. John Wayne was right in there.
What about one of the movies that your father made that I liked enormously was The Grapes of Wrath, which hardly comes into that category. Do you remember seeing that?
I don't mean that my father was only making those kind of movies. I think he made some of the best movies that have ever been made in this country. Grapes of Wrath was made before I was born. I think it's one of the most important American pictures
ever made.
He's very proud of it.
Do you think, as you're becoming more aware of the kind of very plastic, artificial images of women that have been made in films, it's going to be harder and harder to find parts, or harder and harder to give a performance that's true for you?
Well, you know, it's very hard to have a movie made unless the director, the writer are well-known, and the well-knowns are men. And the well-knowns, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, don't have much to say of political significance. And when I say political, I don't mean like a message film, you know. I hate them. I hate films that proselytize and preach. I just mean a film that moves people forward, or that makes people either feel strong and tells the truth and doesn't lie to people, or a film that exposes something that needs to be exposed. There are very few films like that made in this country. There are wonderful films made in Latin America. Some European directors making very important statements through films, but not in the United States now, at this time. So, the solution is to not wait around for other people to bring you parts and offer you things. The solution is to go out and get it done on your own, and I've never done that before. I've always been the kind of actress that has done all kinds of other things, and I've just waited around for people to offer me roles, and either I liked them or I didn't like them. And now I'm faced with the situation of having to create them myself or with other people. So we are. We're working on a film about Vietnam and several other projects that may never get done. I don't know. But I think they probably will.
At City Hall this morning, we saw Councilman Schneider trying to get you censored by the City Council in Los Angeles. Has this been happening in other states in America?
It's pending before the state legislatures in 5 states. It's passed in Indiana. It's a sort of a neo-McCarthy tactic to discredit the peace movement by picking off individuals.
What could it actually achieve?
Well, legally it couldn't. A resolution of censure couldn't force me to go to jail, or although in some instances it could prevent my going into these states. But what it would do is lay the groundwork for attempts to boycott my films, prevent me from working, destroying my career, slandering me, preventing me from speaking on campuses or in churches or any kind of institutions like that. Already, it's much harder for me to be able to speak. And apparently there are moves within the Hollywood community to keep me from working.
Has it been affecting your work, do you think?
It's hard to know because I'm pregnant, so I don't know. I don't know how much, It's not that I'd be able to work anyway.
What about your brother? I mean, growing up with him, you had somebody to play Sheila of the Jungle with. Were you very close growing up?
I probably was a tyrant to him. I don't know. I don't know. We're very close. We've always been close.
And what was it like when you went away to school?
Is it ever good? I don't know. I've never known anybody that's liked going away to school. My first year, I followed all the rules. I was a real goody-goody. I was the president of the class, and I did everything right. And then somewhere along in there, I realized that the rules were foolish, that they didn't mean anything, that they picked on people, that they were very cruel to people who were Jewish, or there was a cripple girl in school who was constantly being discriminated against, that the teachers were unfair in many instances and took it out on the students. And as I began to see this, I came back the second year and I was no longer the goody-goody. I had to be watched because I would break rules and because I would encourage other people to break rules because I felt that they were wrong. And
what you described there is really, in a sense, identifying with the, say, the discrimination against the Jewish girls or the discrimination against the crippled girl. And what I sense in you all the time is this sense of being able to identify with suffering. I mean, are you aware of that in yourself as a sort of very conscious thing?
Always. But people always used to make fun of me because I would always identify with the underdog, with the juvenile delinquents when I was younger, with so-called criminal elements even. I identify with people who are in jail because I spent a very short period of time in jail once, and the thing that I learned when I was there is that everyone is a political prisoner. That I was in a women's jail in Cleveland, Ohio, on a completely trumped-up charge. I was accused of smuggling dope when in fact they were health food vitamins. Anyway, I was there with some women who were obvious political prisoners, although it is denied in this country that such things exist. There were women who were in prison because they had participated in anti-war demonstrations. But there were other women. I was in a cell with a woman who was a junkie and who was kicking the habit, who had been committing a series of armed robberies in order to be able to get her heroin. And I realized that she was as much of a political prisoner as the other women because she was forced into a situation where she had 3 children, she had no husband, she had no money, she couldn't get a job. She turned to heroin to escape the reality of her life, which she was unable to cope with and had no help. She couldn't get welfare, nothing. And society had forced her into a position where she became a criminal. And I identify very strongly with people who are victims. I think most people are, men and women.
Can you find any sort of unhappiness in your own life as a child or growing up that intensified this in any way, or?
What right have I to talk about unhappiness when I always had enough to eat? I always went to the best schools. I've had it very easy, but like
even people from the middle class or upper middle classes in a country like the United States, people are alienated. They feel that they don't really have any power over what happens to them, don't have any way of controlling their lives, determining what their future will be. You go on to practically any campus in the United States, and the people who go to these campuses are middle to upper middle class kids, say. And you look at their faces, and what you see are people wandering in a daze. You see people with glazed eyes, not knowing why they're there, where they want to go, what will tomorrow bring, and does it matter anyway. And I think that's just a general malaise in this country. That's what I want to see disappear. I don't think that that's, I mean, a lot of people say that's human nature, that's life, that's fatal. It's not true. You know, if you have a child, what you realize is that children aren't born with glazed eyed. Children are born alert and ready and eager and learning and alive. And as they get older, that's all crushed, it's all subdued, it's all pushed back, it's all denied, it's all negated. And it doesn't have to be.
Does that mean that, to a certain extent, you have a permanent commitment to change? I mean, to the possibility of change, to constantly question what you're doing, why you're doing it, should you be here, should you not be here, is this right, is this wrong? I mean, is that a kind of little voice that lives inside your head and talks to you?
Having come to the conclusion a very short time ago, and having wasted a long time getting there, that people can change, that people can change history, we can change ourselves, we can change the society that we live in, that the things that we don't like today are not fatal. They are things that can be altered and will be in time, and that we have a purpose, and our purpose is to assume a responsibility for creating that change. And there isn't anything more exciting, I don't think, you know, and I know you feel the same way. There's nothing more exciting than experiencing change, than being able to be with people who can help you grow, being able to gain strength, if you're a woman, from other women. It's just like the world opens up all the time. There's always a new discovery. There's always so many things to gain strength from.
But I think the question that most people would ask would be to say that in terms of the way most people live their lives, to be free to travel, to be free to work, to be successful in your work, to be married, have a child. I mean, all those kind of traditional models of success. What I'm trying to get at is, why would you question that? I mean, here you, at that point, have everything that is meant to be terrific.
What I find difficult to understand, and what I would think what people would find difficult to understand, is not why I changed, but why did it take me so long? Why did I have to be 31 years old?
Well, a lot of people haven't changed at all.
But more people have than haven't.
Not from the position you changed from. That was my point.
I changed from the position that most people from my class changed from, which was somebody who felt, what is the use of spending much time thinking about politics or foreign policy or what's going on, because there's nothing we can do about it. Feeling helpless before what was seen as or sensed as a sort of a monolith of power. There's nothing we can do. Having inherited a sense of cynicism about the electoral process and so forth, largely because of when I grew up, which was the McCarthy era. And I changed because the conditions that exist in the world today are very different than they were then. We saw students in Paris begin to change things in the internal politics of France. We saw change all over the world. And so there was a sense of great optimism, a great sense of possibility of doing things. And that was when I came in on it at a very late age. I was carried by the wave of social forces that were going on at the time. There were objective conditions that made it much easier for people to say, me too, I want to be part of this change. There's something going on, and I believe that it can lead to something better.
How did you feel when, on the one hand, you were given an Oscar for portraying a prostitute in Clute, and on the other hand, when you came back from Vietnam, having broadcast there to the pilots to try and stop the bombing, you were called a traitor? I mean, how did that feel?
It's just cockeyed, especially for a woman. If you say, I will no longer be what you want me to be, I will not be an image that is created of me and be forced to live within that image for the rest of my life. I will speak what I feel, and I will try to learn more and more so that what I say is meaningful. And that's, you're told her, shut up, you traitor. And the unreality is rewarded. It's, the tendency is to sort of like not even notice that it's happening because you get so used to it. I try to keep myself constantly shocked by such things. I had been a model and an actress in New York. And, you know, I mean, I'd done all right, nothing spectacular, but I'd done all right. I came out here, and I had my first screen test, and I was put in a chair with a lot of lights shining in my face, and they tipped me. It was like a dentist chair, and they tipped me back, and a lot of men hovered around and looked at my face, and then made the pronouncement. I was all wrong. I was not material for movie stardom. My cheeks were too fat, my hair was the wrong color, eyebrows were on the... And they proceeded to change me. They plucked my eyebrows, they put lipstick on. I looked like I had an eagle coming out of my mouth or something. Dyed my hair blonde, and then the last thing of all, I remember I went down to the soundstage, and a message came from Jack Warner, who was the head of the studio. The studio has since become part of a multinational corporation called Kinney Leisure. It's the way that all the studios are going. But at that time it was Warner Brothers, and it was run by Jack Warner, who sent a message down informing me that I had to wear falsies because they were not going to invest a lot of money in a flat-chested actress, because movie stars did not have flat chests. Well, I thought, these men are experts. I mean, they've been doing it for 20 years, 30 years. They've been looking at Garbo and Betty Davis and all these other women. They must know what they're talking about. And, you know, I guess I was okay in New York, but now that I'm out here in Tinselville, I guess it's just no good anymore. And so I bought it. You know, I spent from about 21 years old to 30 with blonde hair and falsies.
What kind of films did you make during that period?
I was in a movie of Tennessee Williams' first comedy, which I think has a lot to say today. It's about marriage, called Period of Adjustment. I did some very stupid movies, too, like Any Wednesday, and just silly things. and then some good comedies, like Barefoot in the Park, and then I did movies like Barbarella.
That was after you went to France?
That was after, yeah.
Why did you decide to go to France? I mean...
Well, at that time, the interesting movies were coming from Europe, the Nouvelle Vague, and a wonderful French director called René Clément, who made a movie that you might know of called Forbidden Games, offered me the part in a movie, and I took it, and I went, and just didn't come back. It was another culture, it was another life, and I thought I could find a more meaningful existence, I guess, outside of the United States, because I had just been disappointed here.
So what was happening to you personally in France? I mean,
I was floating through space as Barbarella with my blonde hair and falsies, while Watts was burning. I was married. I was living in a kind of environment where women just didn't talk that much about social things, didn't get involved in politics so much.
You were cooking.
I baked a good souffle, right? I ran a tight ship, and I had 2 stepchildren, and I was getting like a dried up prune or a leaf that was about to fall off a branch It's like, you know, we're brought up to look to marriage as being some ultimate goal, you know, that we need, and the need is created. If you're not married, God, it means you're lonely. It means you're not wanted. It means a lot of things that are very frightening to women. So you get married, and then the responsibility of having the marriage work, usually, I think in a sort of not spoken way, rests with the woman. Or at least from what I can tell and what I experience and what I've seen in other marriages, it's the woman who works the hardest to keep the marriage together. And what I think this means is that all of us recognize that if you allow yourself to change at your normal rate of speed, if you allow yourself to expand, to flex new muscles, to learn to fly, if both people are doing that, the chances of them developing in the same direction at the same rate of speed is going to be very slight. The chances are one is going to be developing a little faster than the other and maybe in a different direction, and then what's going to happen? The marriage is going to break up. Because most of the time the reasons that we're married are not based on reality, like who we really are, but what we would like each other to be. But it was you never can live, I guess, outside, you know, whatever is, you know, the social forces that are at work. And 1968 was happening all over the world. And living in Paris in 1968 didn't leave you unchanged and unmoved. Paris was in flames. Students and working people were organizing and rioting and making themselves felt and almost toppling a government. In Chicago, the man that I was later to marry, Tom Hayden, was one of the organizers in the demonstrations that were called to try to expose the corruption within the Democratic Party. And we watched on television as people were being bludgeoned into the street in Chicago. And then I remember one thing in particular was a march. There were about 500,000 Americans marching on the Pentagon. And there were many women in the lead. That particularly impressed me because there was no women's movement in this country when I had left. And I remember seeing all of these people, and they were young, and they were old, and they were third world and white, men and women, marching on this edifice. The women, there was one shot of women walking up to the bayonets, right to the ends of the bayonets, and looking the soldiers in the eyes, and the soldiers shaking under their helmets, and the women putting flowers in the ends of their guns and then being beaten into the ground. And it had a very, very strong effect on me, because I realized if that many people were willing to put themselves in physical danger, were willing to march against this seemingly immovable, imperturbable power, which is the Pentagon, that it was something that I should look into much more than I had. And when I first was told that the United States had destroyed a village in Vietnam, quote, in order to save it, unquote. I don't know if you remember that period in 1969, I think, when an entire village was just wiped out, and the justification given by the Pentagon was, we had to save it, and in order to do that, we had to destroy it. I said it's absolutely not true. It's not true. The United States would never do such a thing, and if it did happen, there is a good reason for it. And the soldiers were saying there is no reason for it. There's no reason. We're destroying a people that don't want us there. These people are not our enemies. And for a guy who was there and who went over believing one thing and has come away psychically in shreds because of what he's been through, you have to begin to say, well, then what is going on and why? And this just happened to tens of thousands of American people, and it's changed American history, I think, like no other Nothing we've ever done before. It's caused Watergate. The government wants to wage a war, the people don't want it to. So the people become the enemy of the government. One of the really fascinating and horrifying things that people are seeing as they watch day after day the Watergate saga unfold on television is that we have become the enemy of our own government. I mean, the other day on television we actually heard Magruder talk about how these operatives, the FBI and CIA operatives that were working for the committee to re-elect the president, were planning things like kidnapping left organizers and taking them to Mexico for a period of time, just taking them away, all the way to hiring call girls to infiltrate the Democratic party apparatus during the Democratic convention, getting big boats that would take the Democratic Party officials on the boat with the call girls, and then rigging the boat with cameras and radios. And
What did you find when you first went over to Hanoi?
we were flying into Hanoi, and we had to go back and wait for 4 hours in Vientiane, which is the capital of Laos, because as we were approaching the airport in Hanoi, there were 8 U.S. Phantom jets dive bombing over the city, unloading. I mean, you could just see this blowing up of this city, and this was never reported in the American press. It wasn't until the French embassy was bombed and one white man was killed that the bombing of Hanoi first made front page headlines. But this was in July. There was no white man killed. What had been bombed was a shoe factory, a camera factory, a cigarette factory, and a hospital. This was just one day in Hanoi, and it was going on all the time. Cities just blown away, towns, little tiny villages in the middle of rice paddies, the weapons that were being used. I think that was the most horrible. Most of the Americans that I know who went to Vietnam were devastated when they found out by seeing the victims what kind of weapons we were using. Half of the weapons that we were dropping and are continuing to drop on Cambodia today are illegal. They're outlawed. They're considered war crimes. For example, the spider mine. It lands on the ground, and as it lands, a spring is released so that tiny little pieces go off in all directions with strings attached, and a wide radius, and if someone trips over one of these, it will unleash the bomb and you'll have the fragments go into you. There are other kinds that explode once on the ground and then bounce, and are geared to explode in such a way that the fragments go 5 feet into the air, which is the neck height of the average Vietnamese person. So it's meant to sever the neck at the height of the average Vietnamese person. I mean, it's diabolical. Or they'll be disguised as animal droppings. Or there'll be these little bombs that when they explode, they spew out hundreds of thousands of tiny, jagged steel fragments. Or in the latter stages of the war, they were plastic, because plastic wouldn't show up on x-rays. You can't take them out of the body. So here there are thousands of people, and they're essentially the old people, the women, and the children who are the most vulnerable, who spend the rest of their lives in agony with fragments throughout their bodies. And the weapons, it's very interesting. The Pentagon officially calls these weapons psychological impact weapons. And the Pentagon rationale for the use of these weapons is to demoralize the people. See, if you kill one person, you bury them and it's over. If you wound permanently 10 people, for each 10 people there have to be 3 or 4 doctors and nurses that are tied up, people to carry them around, people to tend to them for the rest of their lives. The war is not over. It's changed phases. At least in Vietnam, there's no military presence, American military presence on the ground. There are no bombs falling in Vietnam. More bombs are falling on Cambodia than have ever fallen in any part of Indochina in the whole war. It is terribly drastic what we're doing to Cambodia. We're just destroying tens of thousands of people, civilians, all around Phnom Penh. But in Vietnam, while there's no visible American military presence, we are still there because we are supporting a dictatorship in South Vietnam. The dictatorship of General Thieu, Nguyen Van Thieu, would not exist if it were not for the $3 billion of American tax money that goes there to keep him in power. The Ford Philcos and the General Motors and the Shell Oil and all these people who want to be in South Vietnam. And why shouldn't they? They can invest there without paying taxes. They have access to tens of thousands of Vietnamese peasants whose land has been destroyed by our bombs and who are starving in cities and who are forced to work for American businessmen for about 90% less than what American workers cost. So there's slave labor, virtual slave labor, available to American businesses. Much natural resources, oil, tin, tungsten, rubber, and so forth. They don't have to pay any taxes. So they're runaway shops. They're going over there as they are in Africa, Latin America, and other parts of Southeast Asia, creating rising unemployment in this country. So you've got these guys, they're graduating from high school, they can't afford to go to college, and they're looking around for a job, and there's no job. There are no jobs to be had. They can't even get on welfare anymore. You know, they're doing some smack, they're getting more and more depressed, and suddenly they look up and there's a big poster with this smiling dude that looks a little bit like them, and it says, "Looking for a job? Join the Army." "Oh," the guy says, "fun, travel, and adventure. I can go abroad, I can see new sights, I can learn a skill, come back and put it to work." So they join the Army. Who are these people? They're the sons and the daughters of the very working people in America who can't get jobs, who suffer the most from the businesses going to Vietnam. Their children are the ones that are sent over to fight. And what are they fighting for? They're fighting so that more businesses can go over there. The Nixon administration is making huge efforts to interpret the war as peace with honor, using the returned American prisoners of war to do it. If we allow paid killers, bomber pilots who absolutely without thinking, admittedly without thinking or knowing anything about the people of Vietnam or the war, dropping tons of bombs from 5 miles in the air on women and children and hospitals and churches, if we allow these men to be made into heroes, when tens of thousands of armless and legless veterans who fought on the ground in South Vietnam are starving in the United States, unwelcomed, unknown. If we allow that kind of thing to happen, we are going to be setting ourselves back, if not just beginning to completely destroy ourselves as a country forever. There is no excuse for silence. There is no excuse, not comfort, not family loyalty, nothing. No excuse for not living up to your social responsibility.